So we arrive at the blue chips, and it's well, a great, I guess, sign, Michael, that this is so hard to put together is that I know we put together our list, and then you have another addition here on the nickel corners, at least, where, as I'll just lay this out to start here, Kendall Fuller looks like he's going to be one of your blue chip nickel guys, Asante Samuel Jr., Troy Hill, Mike Hughes, Sean Murphy Bunting. Those are your five. But I know there's another guy that, as we're doing this, you realize, wait, I need to add this guy. I need to add one more. Who did you add?
Well, it was Chauncey Gardner, from New Orleans, who I think really does a wonderful job for their defense. It kind of really allows them, to get away with what they get away with defensively, and in Dennis Allen's scheme, which requires him to play a lot of man-to-man. But Gardner Johnson, I thought, was an outstanding player. So I think Murphy Bunting does too. I mean, all these guys here, again, they're just all in the cluster. Nobody's 1, 2, or 3. They're in the cluster. I think Troy Hill was a kid that, he went to Cleveland, didn't really work in Cleveland. He works better in the Rams scheme, playing in that slot, being able to kind of utilize the skill set. He's got quickness. He's got ability to tackle. I think Asante Samuel Jr. is one of those other guys that could go inside and play really well. He's got good ball instincts like his father, who took a lot of chances but makes plays on the ball. And then Fuller in Washington, I think ultimately, even though Washington was so bad on third down, so bad in pass defense, Fuller can play in the slot, and it gives you a nickel corner. And when you have that, now remember, the nickel corner also has to attack the pocket, blitz, be able to sack the quarterback. They're playing on all different levels. So I think this is such an important position. It used to be in draft rooms, you just had corner lined up, right? Yeah, here's our corners. Well, much like the receiver board, the corner board has to be different now too. You've got to line up guys and say, okay, here's the nickel corners in the draft. Like, this guy isn't going to be an outside corner, but he could play 800 plays as a slot corner because, let's face it, it's no longer a third down position. It's an every down position.
And you think, too, look at a guy like Asante Samuel Jr., where the Charger defense was just so porous last year, mostly because of the running game on the ground. It was 30th in rush defense last year. For a guy like Samuel, and you think about maybe these overall defensive schemes that struggle in general, if you look back at 2021, like in your mind, for a guy like him who's done so much for the Chargers, even in some games where they struggled, like how much worse off would a team like that be if they didn't have a presence of a guy like him who could do multiple things and who could attack into the pocket?
I mean, look, this Charger team, we talk about how bad they are on defense. They're 32nd in the league. Brendan Staley's a defensive coach, and they've got a blue chip player at safety. We talked about him last week. They've got a really good nickel corner in Samuel. They got a blue chip corner. We'll get to him in a second, in J.C. Jackson, with all his interceptions last year and his ability to make plays on the ball. And then they've got a blue chip player in the front seven in Joey Bosa. I mean, for them to be this bad on defense, something's wrong here. Something's wrong. They got a lot. I mean, look, they have more talent than the Rams have. Now, is Bosa as talented as Donald? No, but, he's a blue chip player too. We'll get to him. Is James as good as – he's probably the best player in the secondary on defense. I mean, think about it. They've got to do it. And I thought last year, the way Samuel, he played in 12 games, I thought he was really starting to get a feel for it. I think he'll really emerge as a good slot corner. I think the problem he's got to have is he's got to tackle better, much like his dad. He's got to tackle a little bit better. Had too many missed tackles last year, but I think he's got a chance to be a really good third down corner.
When you phrase it like that, you're right. When you phrase it like that, you start listing all the blue chip guys, and then you realize, Brandon Staley, he's this defensive mind. It just – and we there's so much hype on this Chargers team this year, but as you point out, like at some point, something has got to give, and the meshing has to happen. But Samuel Jr. makes that list. How about we get to the blue chip on your outside corners here, the moment we've been waiting for. There are some guys on here, probably not a surprise whatsoever. There's some vets on the list. I would assume, is Jalen Ramsey your number one guy on this list?
I think there's a separation. Yeah. There's a separation between Ramsey and everybody else because Ramsey's one of the few guys that can play press. He can win breakfast and he can win lunch. He can win dinner. Like, he can do it both. J.C. Jackson's good at both too. He's up there. I think J.C. Jackson's a little inconsistent, but he plays a lot of man. I mean, one thing about New England, they play a lot of man-to-man. And it's the same thing with Marlon Humphrey at Baltimore. They play a lot of man. So you really get same thing with New Orleans. They play a lot of man. The reason I put Ward up there, and I could have gone Terrell or Howard as the fifth guy over Ward. I think Ward's a really talented player, but they don't play a lot of man-to-man in Cleveland. They really don't. Now, the other side gets a lot of the action. Nobody really goes after Ward. Ward's a good instinctive player. I think he certainly is a top elite player. So I beat him. I allowed him to be the blue chip player here, but I wish they played more man to man in Cleveland than they do. But still, I think these 5 guys are really good. J.C. Jackson, to me, he's got to show that he can continue to make plays on the ball. He's going to give up a few. Look, they're all going to give up a few, right? Nobody's pitching no hitters here. But the key is they got to make plays on the football. And I think Humphrey and Lattimore, they're both really instinctive, and they become better as the rush improves.
Right. And first off, I don't think anybody's going to dispute your putting Ramsey on the top, kind of in his own little tier here. Humphrey is interesting because, like, we've seen him move around so much throughout his time, and versatility. I'd have to imagine from your perspective too, being being a longtime GM, like that's got to matter so much. If Humphrey, let's just say we were listing him as a nickel corner, like where would he rank would he be I would assume he'd be a blue chip nickel guy too, right? Which
no
is
doubt.
Pretty impressive.
His versatility is outstanding, right? I mean, he can do everything, and he's good on all levels of the defense. He's really good on all levels of the defense, and he's got the instinct. See, I think what we don't always understand about the cornerback position is so, as I look straight ahead into this camera, I am looking at the camera. The cornerback position, when you play right corner, and when I say right corner, it's always from as I stand looking at the defense. So if I'm standing at the free safety position, the right corner's to my right, okay? He only sees the game through his left eye. Okay, he only sees the game through his left eye because everything's coming to him in that fashion. If he goes over and plays left corner, he only sees the game through his right eye. That's why it's hard sometimes for guys to go from corner to safety. They're not used to seeing the game through both eyes. Humphrey's one of those players that sees it through both eyes. So is Lattimore. That's why Rob Woodson can go from corner to safety with really easily. Ronnie Lott, corner to safety. They saw the game through both eyes. Some guys don't. Nnamdi Asomugha, he only saw the game through his left eye. Everything had to come with him that way. And I think because of that vision, you lose some of your instincts to find the ball when the ball's up in the air.
Right.
And I think that's ultimately what happens. But I see Humphrey as being that guy. I mean, Humphrey can do it. It's hard to judge it, too, because in college, right, everybody thinks the field corner in college is the most important corner, all right? Well, if the ball's on the left, let's say the ball's on the right hash mark, the left as the defense looks at it, and the field's to the right as the defense looks at it, that throw from that hash mark all the way down the field's a hard throw. The easiest throw to make is the one to the short field, right? That throw's the easiest. So that guy's got to be able to run. That guy's got to be able to cover because the ball's easier to throw over here than it is to throw to the wide part of the field. Whereas in the NFL, the ball's always in the middle field. There's no short field to really throw to.
Yeah, I know you put all that together, and that's fascinating too. Just think about because you think of Nnamdi Asomugha, right? And it's like iconic shutdown corner, but obviously there are limitations there. You think about what you're just talking about with Humphrey. Would you go as far to say that if you're just looking at if you're valuing the positional versatility above all else and the ability to look out of both eyes at all times and have the field vision, like is he a guy who you would put as the most valuable cornerback just because of the things he can do? Whereas maybe Jalen Ramsey, he is certainly the most talented and on another level of all these guys. But would you go as far as to say Humphrey is your most valuable corner if you're evaluating these blue chips on just overall top to bottom, what they bring to a team, aside from just their specific talent there?
Well, I mean, Ramsey X-outs the other receivers, so, he's separate. But to me, Humphrey's versatility is good. It really makes – now, he missed 4 games last year, but he was still so effective for them, because he can tackle well. He takes away the receiver, plus he can attack the pocket. He blitzed – he was able to rush, hit the quarterback, and they utilized his skill set in that area. So for me, and then he plays in the kicking game. Plus he plays in the kicking game. So he's a versatile guy. I mean, I like all of them. I like Terrell and Howard a lot, too, who's in the red category. Yeah. I like Ward. I think Ward, to me, that draft was they picked Baker and Ward. I said it at the time. I would have picked Bradley Chubb and Quentin Nelson and traded back in the first to get Lamar Jackson. But, they still end up with a good player in Ward.
Right. And then, you think about a guy like a Marshawn Lattimore who we get into that whole trying to break guys down into, are they, total shutdown guys? And you look at what Lattimore did, where he forced 38 incompletions in man coverage. That's since 2017, which is a pretty ridiculous amount. Where he's clearly getting thrown out a lot, but he's all at the same time been able to have a really high level of production there. And you talked about too the scheme that it takes when you play in Dennis Allen's defense there in New Orleans. For Lattimore, is it? Obviously he's a blue chip. I wonder if he's almost in some circles even underrated a little bit. I don't know if we've gotten to the point yet where like we can really appreciate what he does, because at least if we're talking man to man, and I know that was one of your criteria here, just breaking down what these guys and how that matters to you, at least when you're looking at these corners. I mean, Lattimore, like from a pure man-to-man perspective, he's got to be, I mean, obviously, as we just talked about, right? Not quite with Ramsey, right? But he has to be of your next options, maybe one of the first or second you'd pick.
No doubt. I mean, plus he's a really good tackler. He had 68 tackles last year, only had 3 misses. That's pretty damn good.
That helps.
And he can play man-to-man. Now there's certain guys that give him trouble. There's no doubt. But, I mean, look, one thing about evaluating corners, nobody's pitching a shutout. Like even Ramsey's going to give up some plays. But you got to be careful throwing the ball over to him. That's the other thing. Like for all the plays that Diggs gives up, like to throw the ball at Diggs, you're taking a risk because he can make plays on the football. And he's not one of those guys who drops it. Like J.C. Jackson in the Buffalo game, he had a chance to intercept. That was one of the few interceptions he dropped, the one that was in New England. He rarely drops the ball when it gets in his hands. What happened in that playoff game? I mean, think about the safety for San Francisco who drops the ball. That game might change if he holds on to it. That's an important – you got to be able to make the play when it counts, and Lattimore does.
I still, as a Packer fan, I mean, Jair Alexander, we remember how good he was in the 2021 playoffs. I can't help but wonder, like, if he was on the field, would that have maybe been different for Green Bay in 2022? Just, again, the recap here of your blue chip guys one more time. Jalen Ramsey, Rams. J.C. Jackson, Chargers. Marlon Humphrey of Baltimore. Marshawn Lattimore for the Saints. Denzel Ward for the Browns, and then the blue chip nickel corners, Kendall Fuller of the Washington Commanders, Asante Samuel Jr. of the Chargers, Troy Hill with the Rams, Mike Hughes of the Lions, and then Sean Murphy-Bunting of the Buccaneers. But again, kind of also an asterisk there, C.J. Gardner-Johnson of the Saints. It's kind of an honorable mention, blue chip nickel.
Thanks for watching the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, and for more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to VSiN Live and the GM Shuffle podcast with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN, wherever you get your podcasts.